Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I often like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today, I am in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, but our guest is over across the river in Virginia. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Mr. John O'Connor. John, thanks very much for taking the time today.
Glad to be here, Jeff.
I know John through Eric Schlam, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago. Eric's a great musician, friend, peace guy, and I met John backstage when you were playing with Cargo and the Heavy Lifters, I believe, at Jam and Java.
Yes.
And then, kind of coincidentally, well, for me, we found out about John's concert, and he can tell us more about it. Concerts for...
Well, this particular concert was the We Have a Dream concert. I have a 501c3 called Concerts Unite Us, and this was our first show.
Okay.
It's sort of our kickoff, and what we do is we raise money for local community charities, especially focusing on equal justice, people who are kind of denied what they deserve in our country.
Nice. Well, great mission. 501c3 like Planetary Gig Society. And so we went to the show the other night and just, oh my God, it was fabulous. Phil Wiggins, Gaya Degbalola, Cargo and the Heavy Lifters, some great acts. You did a great job with that. So we want to talk a little bit about, your organization too. But, I just always like to check in with people and ask, when do you remember music first coming into your life? Were your parents, did they play? Did you have siblings that played? Did you start out with bass? How did music kind of come into your life? How did it grab you?
Well, there weren't any musicians in my family, but I just loved listening to my little AM radio, and I loved the music on there. I loved the Motown. I loved the rock and roll. Everything that was coming out. And also the music had a message back then. There was so much protest music on the radio. There was so much music that was about social justice or injustice, as the case may be.
Right.
You see that, but that was one of the things that drew me in, because I was always, from a very, very early age, brought up to look at the world from a social justice perspective. My parents were fairly liberal and fairly ahead of their time as far as their beliefs about society and politics and justice.
Wow. So, what do you remember the first instrument you picked up? Did you take lessons? I know you and Eric played in bands when you were pretty young, but do you remember your first love instrument or?
Well, I tried piano and I was no good at that. And then I tried violin and I didn't like it. And then I decided I wanted to play bass. Of course, my parents had put a little money into violin lessons, so they said, "You want to do it, you pay for it." So I took my paper out money and I bought a bass and I bought an amp, and I took lessons from Scotty Beislein, who was my older brother's best friend. And so that was about the time I was 13, and then I started jamming around with local guys in the neighborhood at the age of 14, 15, 16, and so on. So that's how I came to love the bass.
Wow. And so, and that neighborhood was it Fort Hunt area or?
It was Fort Hunt. And Fort Hunt, interestingly, even though it's a very small school, like 1,200 people or something, a lot of really great musicians came out of there. I mean, obviously, he was a phenomenal player, but also Phil Wiggins, Sharon Clark. So there was really a tradition of rock and blues music and jazz music that was unexcelled by a lot of schools.
Wow, yeah, Phil Wiggins, he's just such an amazing, unique harmonica player. And so you knew him growing up?
Yes, it's interesting because the first harmonica, a blues harmonica that I ever heard, was Phil Wiggins and a guy named Dennis Arkelich, who would have harmonica battles in a storm drain near the elementary school, one of those big giant storm drains.
No way.
Riding my bike around, And we used to like to ride up and down the giant culvert that led to the storm drain. And I heard this music, and I just became enthralled with it.
Yeah, he has such an amazing style and played for a long time with John Cephas, of course, and is such a great talent. So you were jamming around with your, as Eric would say, your mates, schoolmates back in those days, and you just ended up in a number of bands. What kind of bands were you playing in back then? Rock bands, I guess.
Well, I started out playing rock and blues. My teacher, Scotty Beislein, taught me that the root of all American music is really blues, or at least with rock and blues and jazz. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to play that, you have to learn the blues first. And I fell in love with that. And that's when I met a bunch of much older guys who played blues, and they needed a bass player, and it was the best they could find. So I ended up getting to work with a lot of really talented people. My first time on stage was with Bob Margolin. I played with Phil Wiggins. I played with Daryl Davis. I played with Ron Holloway. So I really got, because I was working with older cats, I got to work with some really good local people, many of whom went on to do incredible things.
Well, yeah, well, I know that the group that you're with now, or maybe it's one of the groups you're with now, Cargo and the Heavy Lifters. You guys really know how to bring it. That's some rockin' music there.
Thank you. We're old guys. We've been doing this a long time. If we haven't learned how to do it by now, we're never going to learn it. Thank you.
So you did have kind of a purpose, or you found meaning in sort of music and the music connections early on. Um, how did that sort of flourish from then until now? What sorts of things have you been doing? How have you kind of seen the power of music in the social justice movement?
Well, from an outsider's perspective, I remember a lot of songs like Mavis Staples' "I'll Take You There," things like that. So coming up, I saw that. Then I tried to write music myself. Uh, One of the first songs I ever wrote was about the murder of Anwar Sadat
Mm.
and the peace process in Israel and with Israel and Egypt. And so I was involved in wanting to use music for peace. When I saw the way music affected audiences and really the power that you have to influence people one on one, eyeball to eyeball in a nightclub, uh, that really made a difference to me. You have the power to make people happy, but you can also make some people think if you have a message. So I saw that very early on.
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty profound. You must have had a number of any particular instances you can remember singing songs or playing and seeing how that that power affected people, or how, or how the effects of people listening to some of your music and what they may have done afterwards.
Yes, there's a number of things that go on over a series of decades. For instance, back in '83, I wrote a song called Trickle Down Blues. In '85, Mike Audich produced his first video with us. Another Fort Hunt guy went on to win 4 Emmys.
Wow.
But his very first video was with me, and it's called the Trickle Down Blues, and it was about homeless people. And I saw people watch that, and remember, this is pre-YouTube. This is '85, but we saw people watch it. It played on local cable TV, so it got a little bit of attention, and I think it might have made a small difference. It certainly helped people that I knew become more aware of the issue. And there was some debate sparked over it too. It
Mm-hmm.
was a political, anti-Reagan, anti-Republican
Yeah, yeah.
video. I try to be non-political, or at least nonpartisan with my music now. I try to reach more people, but it sparked a lot of debate with my friends because of the partisan nature of it. And then I've gone on to do other benefits I've put together. Phil Wiggins and John Cephas played a show with me, and Eric as well, with a band Eric and I have called 11th Hour. And my group at the time, the Deacons, we played a show at George Mason University in the concert hall there as a benefit uh, for the Lorton Community Action Center, which helps very poor people. Again, focus on social justice. And I believe the connection between you and I is that you can't have peace without social justice, and you can't have social justice without peace. Uh, they're both really intertwined so closely. So when Eric said, you want to get on this radio show, I said, oh yeah, absolutely, this would be a great podcast. So I've had a lot of connections through benefit concerts and things that I've put together that I hope have made at least a small difference.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's no peace without justice, no justice without peace. That's certainly correct. In my mind, it's absolutely correct, and it's hard to get people to think that way. Sometime we get so taken off on our own little pursuits or money or financial considerations and things. So your current organization, when did you form that? What are you up to? Who's involved, and what would you like to tell folks about?
Well, last May we started to put this together in May of 2017, and we were going to work under another 5013C, but we found it wasn't really appropriate for what we wanted to do, and I wanted to continue this on. So by February, I had applied for my own. By March, I had the 501c3, working with people on the board, like Cress O'Neill from Amphicares. Now we have Sharon Clark, probably the world's best jazz singer in my estimation. And
She's an amazing singer.
oh yeah,
Heard her the other night at your concert. It's just fabulous.
yeah. And then we've got Dara Padwell-Waddick, who's used to do programming for the Discovery Channel. She's got I think 3 or 4 Emmys herself. She's an incredible media person, and she's joined the board. And actually, I was able to talk Eric into joining the board as well. Uh, so we put this thing together, and I think after the first concert, we didn't have a huge turnout, but we raised a lot of money. So I think this thing has legs.
Yeah, good. And when the first concert, you mean the one that was just last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was?
Yeah, that we have a dream concert.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit more about how how it came about, what the people you were talking with, the I thought it was a good turnout. Certainly there was a little more room, but if you raised some dough and got some legs, that's really key.
Well, it's interesting. This idea started in a really strange and unusual way. It came about through social media. I stumbled on a group called Area 301, which they often call it hip hop for adults. It's really a hip hop fusion group, and they don't sing about negative things. They sing about very positive things. And what I ran into was this video called Dear America, and it was all about the misconceptions and the lack of understanding and the divisiveness that we face now that separates our society. It's really putting this
Right.
huge chasm between two groups. And so the guy who produces it is named John Noel, and he's also plays keyboards and writes a lot of the music. And John and I got in an online conversation about how bad things were and about how people don't use the power of music uh, to address these kinds of social issues anymore, and that it
True.
needed to happen, and it needed to happen with us. So we got this idea to put this concert together. And I'm not a great musician, but I know lots of really great musicians. After I had the idea, I got on the phone and I said, "Hey, who's in?" And everybody said, "Yeah, I'm in. No question. I'm absolutely in for it." So we got some of the world's best performers to throw in with us. And after we started calling people after Charlottesville, I think originally it was going to be just Cargo and John Noel and maybe Eric and a few other people. But after the events of Charlottesville, it became very, very clear that we were becoming far more divided. Um, there's also sort of an element of brainwashing that has occurred through social media, and I think music can overcome that, or at least maybe overcome it in part. You know,
That's an interesting concept. I mean, certainly we've become very divided. Social media is a great thing, information exchange, more conversation, good, but it really has been very divisive. What are your thoughts about music and social media and the getting this word out, helping to change people's understanding about things?
Well, the first thing is artists have to do it. You know, artists have to pick up the ball and be willing to risk suffering whatever criticism they're going to suffer in order to get a message out there. And once you do that, if the music's good, people will listen. If you look at Mavis Staples and why did her music become so popular? If you look at many of the other people, if you look at Bob Dylan, so many other people that had social justice music. If the music's not any good, you don't draw attention. But if the music's good, you draw the attention because of that, and then people start to listen to the message. And what music can do too is it's a longer attention span that's required to listen to a song and listen to the lyrics and see what the story is.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, right now, the average media user has a 12-second attention span. That's shorter than a goldfish. Now, I don't know if you're my age or not, but I'm an old cat. I was born in '62. And at my age, people who don't get influenced by social media have an attention span of about 20 minutes. That should scare everybody. Now, if I can get you to listen to a song for 5 or 6 minutes, then I've at least lengthened your attention span and got you thinking beyond three-word phrases like, you know, lock her up, build the wall,
Yeah.
phrases like that that seem to drive the American political consciousness right now.
Yeah. Well, that's it's certainly a good thought, good concept. I mean, I guess music has been involved in, um, the civil rights movement, some of the early union songs, union efforts, which side are you on, and that sort of thing. But it does seem maybe a little clouded, or we could certainly bring more focus on it, and I guess that's what you're really wanting to do, isn't it?
Yeah, uh, definitely want to do that. And don't forget the anti-war songs, you know, Country Joe and the Fish and many of the other people.
Absolutely,
There
yeah.
were so many different areas of our social and political conscience that were affected in the 60s and 70s
Yes.
by music. And that just doesn't happen now. So we need to bring that back. Um, I'm also I'm a human perception and applied cognition scientist, so I've got an ulterior motive as well,
Mm.
which is to repair the way people think. Because if people can't think for themselves, they can't understand the complex issues around them, and they can't get behind the possible solution. From that point, they just follow easy propaganda, uh, and they're duped. And it doesn't just happen on the right or the left. So I must say the right is far more successful at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's right. Well, I believe that, people can change their minds. We change our minds all the time, every day. And as you say, there's a lot of misinformation and other things that goes on, but there's an awful lot of good transformations, you know, gay marriage, equality, things that people just didn't agree with back 50 years ago or 100 years ago. We've come so far in a lot of ways, but we do have farther to go. And I believe, that's the reason behind the podcast, behind Planetary Gig Society, is I do think that we can all collectively change, raise our consciousness, and make things a little better than they are now with all this divisiveness, greed, racial animosity, all that sort of thing. So, what you're doing? No, that's my bird clock, and I think it's an owl.
It will give you an editable point.
Yeah. Well, I decided I was just gonna, rather than try to work these things around the clock, I was just gonna let the birds sing when they wanted and point it at. So there you go.
Okay.
Um,
No, but to answer that, I think we've seen, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen reversals on all of the things that people fought so hard to get and sacrificed for, and
yes. Yes.
even saved their lives. So that was a big motivation behind John Noel and Area 301's song "Dear America," and it was a big motivation of mine. It was a big motivation of the updated version of Trickle Down Blues. It's really not the same song. It's called Trickle Down Blues Revisited. So we're out there, we're producing videos, and we're trying to change this. But we really need to reverse this trend of going backwards. And there's a tremendous danger right now when we look at the makeup of the Supreme Court, when we look at policies, executive orders, laws that have been defeated very narrowly. Uh, we're in a lot of danger. I think people realize that. So it's just a matter of mobilizing. And I think we can do that through music. Perhaps not to the degree that we could before. You know, it used to be all over the radio and media. If you wrote a good protest song, it got out there. Now it's, you know, I don't want to use hedonistic, but I do want to use the word hedonistic. Music is much more about self-gratification and puffery and really not very cerebral, not very socially conscious. None of those things really seem to make it very far, other than on a local level or other than with indie artists and people like
I think you're exactly right. I sort of perceive it as there's an awful lot of fear out there, kind of this us versus them attitude. You know, the rich want the money, these people want this, the corporations. It's not about all of us. It's not about our oneness, our commonality, our common humanity, and music can certainly instill those and help promote those thoughts and concepts. So I think you're really onto something. I mean, certainly, as we're sitting here talking, I'm thinking, well, you know, our organizations are kindred spirit organizations, and no reason we shouldn't, you know, team up as best we can. So I mean, I'm really happy that made the connection through Eric, that I was able to go to the concert. We certainly want to be supportive in the future and help, you know, promote whatever we can do to help what you're doing. I think it's great, John.
that. Let's do a concert together. How about the Concert for Peace and Justice? Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds good. We can definitely do that. We can pull it off. I know, you know, some musicians on this side of the river too. We
Okay.
can, you know, work something out. We got a lot of great friends. I mean, look at this podcast. I've interviewed mostly friends, 50 people with stories about, you know, the power of music in their lives, instruments that they play, like the body tambour to help alleviate pain in people who are dying, synesthesia. Um, Talked with musicians about music and Tai Chi, music and shamanism, music and Reiki. There's just so much there, I think. And I would just really, today, in fact, my interview with Victor Wooten came out. It's out there, and his book, The Music Lesson, to me is so inspirational and just really, really helped my understanding of things. And so, you know, we got a lot of good things going on.
Yeah, and you touched on something that's of importance to me, and you mentioned music for healing. I'm a cognitive scientist, and so I have a different take on how we have to address this issue, especially given the reversal and the chasm that has come between people, the divisiveness. This has been influenced by propaganda. It's the short 12-second attention span. The hatred is a matter of propaganda getting into the most visceral emotions in the amygdala. You train it. It's an instantaneous response. You can see it in internet conversations where the same words come up over and over, the same phrases come up over and over. And it's because people have been conditioned like Pavlov dogs to do this. And so in the same way that music can heal and comfort sick people, you can also repair the amygdala that's been damaged by propaganda. These are not
Wow.
these are physiological changes that are occurring with long-term effects. So how do you treat that? And one way to do that is through music. It can heal in a lot of different ways.
It sure can. I think you're exactly right about that. Um, well, John, I appreciate your taking the time today. Love to talking with you more, hearing about your organization, the things you're working on. Definitely want to you know, join up, team up, help support, do whatever you can, because we're not here to try to make money. That's
Yeah.
the last thing. We're here to kind of literally trying to do what we can to uh, help make a better world, and music is seems like one of the best avenues that I can think of. So
In total agreement there, Jeff. I think our time on this planet is short, and we want to go to our deathbeds thinking that we've made the world a better place, not that we've taken money from everybody else for our personal benefit.
yeah, I agree. All right, well, you're very inspirational, John O'Connor. Thanks very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it, and we'll definitely be in touch on some of these things.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for giving us a platform. And just glad we could come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. All right. Thank you, everybody. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.